Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE and see how this particular phone holds up in 2025. Now, there's a lot of love, I could say about this phone, a lot of good things I could say about this phone. There might be some things that might be a little concerning in this particular year. So we'll go ahead and take a look at both these particular devices for the most part. Now, the thing I would definitely tell you is that in my personal opinion, this is a very, very solid phone. Nothing super insane to say here, but like I said, there might be some better options out there. First things first though, if you do want to go ahead and pick up this phone for the most part, links will be down in the description below. You can pick up this phone or some other phones I would recommend buying this year in the description, and you can get them from there and help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of this particular phone. The front side of this particular phone, you are getting a 6.4-inch dynamic AMOLED display. Now, this panel itself really wasn't that bad, even though this was kind of like the budget tier phone. This was not a budget tier phone, by the way. This was more like a mid-tier phone they were making. It really was not a bad option. And I really did think at that moment, this was a pretty solid phone to be able to buy because it wasn't that expensive. It was a good upgrade coming from the S20 FE. And I felt like if you were to go through and buy a phone, well, there were definitely worse phones you could go ahead and buy rather than this thing. So I thought that was a really nice thing going on for this type of device when it came down to it. Now, on top of that, when it kind of comes down to some other areas of this particular device, you're going to have to remember that with, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this phone had very thin bezels on it, which again was another really good upgrade coming from the predecessor. So I thought that was a really nice thing going on for this type of device too. You're getting a 120Hz display on top of all those other things. So that right there is a really cool thing. So like I said, being able to go through and buy these types of devices that are going to be giving you that type of capability in and of itself was a really, really nice thing. On the bottom, you're getting a USB Type-C port, which I love. I love having USB Type-C, and that was really good here. The only downside coming from the S20 FE to the S21 FE was that you were basically losing out on your microSD card slot. So that right there was kind of a disadvantage, I'm going to be honest, because if you were able to go through and pick up an iPad, it would have been really nice to get an iPad that was giving you a little bit more capability from that side. Other than that though, it really wasn't the biggest deal in the world, but that was one thing in one area where you might be thinking at it, you might be wanting a better type of experience, and that is kind of what's going on here. The back of this phone too was very interesting. So you're basically going to be getting a frosted plastic back inside of this phone. So that is kind of an interesting thing going on here when it kind of comes down to it. Because if you're wanting a better type of experience, like I said before, it might have made a little bit more sense to be able to go through and buy a Samsung Galaxy phone that might have been giving you a little bit of a better experience when it came down to that side. So although it's not the biggest deal in the world, that could just be one other thing and one other problem that you might be experiencing inside of this device, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. You are getting a triple camera setup on the back side of this particular phone though, which I actually like a lot. I love being able to go through and buy a phone that's going to be giving me wireless charging and reverse wireless charging, and you were essentially going to be getting that inside of this type of device too, which is something I love seeing. So basically on the outside, it's not really a bad device in any, situation, but it would probably be better if you go through and buy a better device, and that's kind of how I'd sum it up in this particular situation. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there. Now on top of that, when it kind of comes down to its price tag, right now you can probably buy this phone for about $100-ish. So this is actually a pretty inexpensive phone if you kind of think about it. So that right there is a really, really nice thing to basically be able to go ahead and buy this type of phone that's not really going to be costing you that much money. So that right there could end up being a really nice thing here. And like I said before, if I'm going to go through and pick up a device, I really appreciate being able to buy phones like this that are going to be lasting, that are going to be very, very cheap. And that's exactly what's going on here in this particular situation as well. So from that side too, that kind of covers it up there. Now when it comes down to its, camera, this was a triple camera setup on the backside. So definitely a good, premium camera for the most part, which was very surprising to me because Samsung could have put on a really, really terrible phone here, a very bad camera, but they still gave us a pretty decent experience, which was something I actually liked a lot here. So this phone, number one, was essentially still giving you 4K 60 on the back and on the front side of this phone. So nothing super crazy, but at least having 4K 60 on the front and the back, it is a very decent starting point. You're still able to go ahead and have this triple camera setup, so it's a wide telephoto and ultra-wide camera, And again, this phone came out several years ago. So the fact that this device is still holding up this well so many years later, I think is a really, really important thing to kind of think about from that particular side. Now, another very big thing to think about here too is that if you are going to go through and pick up something like a Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, you have to remember that this type of phone is still giving you a pretty good experience when it comes down to its, capability, even when compared to something like a current iPhone. Like look at the iPhone 16e. That phone has a single camera setup. This one has a triple camera setup. That right there is a pretty big difference in and of itself. So once again, not the biggest deal in the world, but that will be one major thing that you might be experiencing there from that particular situation. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there too. Now, on top of that, when it basically comes down to some other areas of this phone, like let's take a look at software longevity here. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this phone is essentially going to be giving you its, main display. So, so it's going to be giving you a pretty good experience there. But this phone didn't really last forever with software. It basically got 4 major versions of Android. So it is, still getting software support here and there, but it's pretty much kind of done. It's not going to be lasting much longer. And that is kind of the situation that we're at as of this point. So you kind of have to ask yourself, are you okay with buying a phone that's going to be supported with software, not that much longer, if at any point at all? And if the answer is no, well then it probably would make a lot of sense to not really purchase a device like this, if I'm being honest. It would make a lot more sense to go and buy a phone that is still going to be supported with software. And like I said, this particular device probably wouldn't really be the one. It wouldn't be the first one here that I would recommend people to buy. On top of that, the battery size is actually pretty good. 4,500 milliamp-hour battery. That's a really good size battery to have inside of this phone. So I will tell you from that side too, if you're going to go through and pick up a device, that kind of makes it a big deal in my personal opinion, because you're able to go through and buy a phone of this type of caliber, and you're going to be getting a really good type of experience when it comes down to that side. So you're going to have to kind of think about it from that perspective as well. And finally, this phone was giving you the Snapdragon 888 chipset inside with 8 gigs of RAM on the base model or on the top tier model, and it was giving you 6 gigs of RAM on the smallest model. And I will definitely tell you, in my personal opinion as well, that in and of itself is another really nice thing to basically be able to do. To be able to go ahead and buy a device like this, once again, that's going to be giving you that type of capability, I think is super important. I love being able to buy these types of iPads or these phones. I keep saying iPad. I love being able to buy these phones because they have really good chipsets. But like I said, it genuinely just doesn't make a lot of sense to go and buy these types of devices anymore, because they're not really going to be giving you software longevity. And although some of the features behind this iPad are still good, it still doesn't really make a lot of sense to go and buy these types of phones in my personal opinion. Because when it comes down to it, this type of device, I think it's still a really good, phone. I think it was a really good phone when it first came out, and I think it's still decent. But there's a really big reason why I wouldn't recommend people to buy this phone anymore, and that's basically because of software updates. This phone is no longer supported with software. So because of that, it just doesn't make any sense at all to go ahead and buy this type of device. It makes a lot more sense to go and buy a device that's still supported with software. So I'll give you some hints. Think of, a phone like a Samsung Galaxy S23 or Samsung Galaxy S24, a Google Pixel 8, or an iPhone 14 Pro. Those types of phones I think are much better options than this particular one when it kind of comes down to it. So from that side, that kind of covers it up there for the most part. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that will mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.